Since the day he decided to start talking about it 9 years after returning from Vietnam, John McCain has not stopped talking about it, invoking his years in captivity when accused of carpetbagging during the race for a House seat in Arizona more than a quarter of a century ago. As a matter of fact, when I think about it now, the place I lived longest in my life was Hanoi, he said in 1982. Most recently shielding the senator from criticism about his own home ownership ignorance, Flack Brian Rogers invade. This is a guy who lived in one house for 5.5 years in prison. Our third story in the countdown has McCain turned his POW status from insulation to excuse. Now, one veteran who served 31 years in the Army fighting in Korea and in Vietnam has had enough. It's time for the senator to stop cheapening the war experiences of thousands of vets and his fellow POWs and his own as well by stretching the boundaries of logic to make his POW status a wild card rebuttal to all accusations or an answer to all difficult questions. When he uses his status as a veteran to deflect legitimate questions and concerns, it devalues not just his service to our country, but ours as well. Lieutenant General Robert G. Gard is part of a group called Vets for Obama, a disclosure which only underscores the fact that support from veterans is probably McCain's to lose. Senator McCain also put his military bona fides in play when he agreed with a questioner in New Mexico who implored him to reinstate the draft. The narrative he's been exploiting, the one about his years as a POW, lending themselves to his superiority as a candidate, backfiring earlier in the month after a pastor, a friend of President Bush, expressed disgust when the senator offered up his wife for the Miss Buffalo Chip contest, as well as for his undignified marital history. Brian Rogers said then, Americans, quote, know that John McCain's faith and character were tested and forged in ways few can fathom. And after Elizabeth Edwards noted how McCain gets government health benefits during a rebuke of his medical care policy, McCain insisted he was familiar with inadequate care, quote, from another government. Paul Rieckhoff, the executive director of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, author of Chasing Ghosts, joins us again. Good to see you, Paul.
Good to be with you, Keith.
How do vets feel like this? These remarks from General Gard about cheapening the experience. Is it now like Rudy Giuliani and Biden's famous phrase, and now in a verb in 9/11? What was it? Was it sacrosanct, and is he now making it kind of silly?
It's getting close. I mean, he's definitely using it as a political shield for just about everything. He's used it for his marital woes. He's used it recently for his inability to recall exactly how many houses he has. Everybody respects John McCain's service. Everybody knows what he's gone through is unimaginable to most folks. But every POW is not necessarily qualified to be president, and it's not a political shield for every screw-up that he has between now and November. And I think it also gives him an opportunity to talk about veterans' issues in a very specific way, and he hasn't done much of that. He hasn't taken it to that next step, and I'd like to see him do it.
Yeah, it does if you take it one step beyond where it is now. If the Democrats were to have run a POW, would it then be an argument of, well, I was in there longer than he was, or he was in there longer than me?
Right.
I mean, the stuff as shield is one thing. He's also used it to validate his policy decisions and create this aura about himself that he knows best in terms of anything military, thus almost anything international. Well, what kind of problems does that line of thinking create?
I think it creates a number of problems. I think it was important to bring up the fact that he does receive veterans benefits. He also went to school on the government's dime. He went to the Naval Academy and he opposed the GI Bill for basically a year of the process. Recently, he's been trying to take credit for that as well, and that's just not true. He's tried to push this argument that he was holding out for transferability. Transferability was always in the law, could have been enacted by the Secretary of the Army or the Navy, and Senator Webb actually offered to include transferability. So did Senator Warner. So I think, especially in the area of defense and the area of Veterans Affairs, he's going to be vulnerable at times, and he's going to be attacked most viciously by veterans like General Gard.
What does having been a POW merit in this political context? What does it give you besides the same kind of respect anybody who made that kind of sacrifice for their country deserves walking down the street?
I think it shows his toughness, it shows his love of country, it shows his fortitude. But I think there's another aspect of this. He was in prison and tortured for 5.5 years. He has a tremendous opportunity to talk about mental health issues, to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, something that's facing hundreds of thousands of veterans who are coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan right now. And I'm a bit bothered by the fact that he can't tell you if he has 7 or 8 houses, because there are 150,000 veterans in America right now who have a total of 0 houses because they're homeless. So I think he has an opportunity to be more aggressive on veterans issues, and specifically talking about his personal experience at the lowest levels, at the darkest times when he was suicidal and dealing with some really tough stuff.
And this latest hint during the week about the draft, they've come back and said, no, he's been clearly opposed to the draft all along, except now 3 occasions when he's responded favorably and thought of theoreticals that he would bring it back. Does that make vets shudder?
You know, not really. I think the draft has become a politically radioactive issue for everyone. But a lot of vets want to see a draft. You know, I disagree with folks who say nobody in the military wants a draft. I hear from a lot of friends who are going over for third and fourth tours and would like to see everybody else in America put something on the line here. I think the reality is that our current pace of operations is unsustainable. You've got more than 500,000 people who've deployed more than once. Our military is overextended. Our National Guard has been run into the ground. And we've got to think long-term about how we sustain these types of operations. The draft may not be probable, but it's possible. And John McCain's going to have to take that on.
And we have a draft. It only consists now of people who are already serving and get to go back whether they like it or not. Paul Rieckhoff, Executive Director of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. As always, Paul, a pleasure.
Thanks, Keith.